screech of the arriving Manhattan subway car was deafening, the smell of electric ozone and damp concrete making Amara's head spin. She stood at the edge of the platform, gripping the cold steel pillar with trembling fingers. Her golden brown skin, a beautiful testament to her mixed Nigerian and white heritage, was ashen. At 24, she shouldn't feel like she was dying, but she was starving, and the sharp, agonizing pain in her ribs made it impossible to take a full breath. She adjusted her thick wool scarf, pulling it higher to hide the violent purple fingerprints left on her neck. The platform tilted. The sea of rushing commuters blurred. Amara's knees finally buckled, but she never hit the concrete. Strong, immaculate hands caught her before she could fall. The scent of expensive bergamot and cold gunmetal surrounded her. Gabriel Rossi, a notorious American mafia boss whose mere presence made strangers cross the street, hauled her easily against his chest. His dark, ruthless eyes zeroed in on her throat where the scarf had slipped. His expression instantly shattered into something lethal. This is a story about falling into darkness and finding it safer than the light ever was. If you want to know how a battered girl from the city became the most fiercely protected woman in the American Mafia, stay with me until the end. The subway station spun in a chaotic blur of gray concrete and flashing yellow lights. Amara's vision tunneled, the edges bleeding into blackness. She couldn't feel her legs, couldn't feel the icy Manhattan draft blowing off the tracks. All she could feel was the suffocating ache in her ribs and the terrifyingly solid wall of muscle she had just collapsed against. Strong hands, immaculate, steady, and terrifyingly gentle, gripped her waist and shoulder, completely absorbing her weight. The man holding her didn't fumble or hesitate. He shifted his stance, bracing her against a chest that felt like carved granite hidden beneath the expensive wool of a bespoke charcoal overcoat. "When did you last eat?" The voice was a low, gravelly rumble, textured like crushed glass wrapped in velvet. It vibrated right through her chest. Amara blinked, her eyelashes fluttering as she tried to force the world back into focus. She looked up. The man's face was a study in brutal American elegance, sharp cheekbones, a square jaw shadowed by dark stubble, and hair the color of midnight swept back from his forehead. He looked to be in his late 30s, radiating the kind of effortless, terrifying power that made the rushing commuters give them a wide berth. But it was his eyes that locked her in place. They were pitch black, fathomless, and currently fixed on her face with an intensity that made her feel dissected. "Aye." Amara's voice was a dry, broken rasp. Her throat burned. "I'm fine." "You're not." He said it plainly, without a drop of inflection, delivering it as a clinical fact. He didn't sound concerned, which somehow made it more intimidating. This was an assessment. "You're starving. And you're trembling." Amara tried to push away, a desperate instinct born from 8 months of learning that relying on a man only led to pain. But her legs turned to water. She swayed, her golden brown skin turning a sickly ash color. Gabriel didn't let her go. Instead, he effortlessly swept one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, lifting her into his chest as if her weight was absolutely nothing. "Put me down," she gasped, her hands instinctively flying up to clutch the lapels of his coat. "You collapsed on a subway platform," Gabriel replied, his tone entirely unchanged. He began walking toward the exit stairs, ignoring the stares of onlookers. "If I put you down, you'll crack your skull on the concrete. And I don't catch things just to watch them break." It wasn't a negotiation. It was a statement of logistics. Amara lacked the breath to fight him, her head falling against his shoulder. He smelled of cold air, expensive bergamot, and a faint metallic tang of gunmetal. As they reached the street level, the biting New York wind whipped around them. A sleek, black-armored SUV sat idling at the curb. Before Gabriel could even gesture, the driver's side door opened, and a massive man in a dark suit stepped out, his eyes scanning the perimeter with military precision before opening the rear passenger door. Gabriel lowered her onto the plush leather seat, moving with that same practiced, terrifying care. He leaned over her, his massive frame blocking out the neon lights of the city. As he reached across to buckle her seatbelt, the thick wool scarf draped around her neck slipped down. Gabriel froze. The air inside the SUV seemed to instantly drop by 10 degrees. The cold assessment in his dark eyes shattered, sharpening into something lethal. He stared at the violent purple and yellow bruises circling her throat, the undeniable imprint of human fingers pressed into her skin. A muscle jumped in his jaw. The silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. "Who did that to you?" The gravel in his voice had turned to blades. Amara's hand flew to her throat, yanking the scarf up. Her heart hammered wildly against her bruised ribs. I don't know what you're. Don't lie to me. It wasn't a yell. It was dangerously quiet. Someone put their hands around your throat and squeezed hard enough to leave marks. They're fresh. A day old, maybe two. Amara shrank back into the leather seat. She wanted to smile, to offer the practiced excuse she used at the library. I tripped, I'm clumsy, it's a rash. But looking into the abyss of his eyes, she knew lies would dissolve before they left her tongue. He had seen too much violence in his life not to recognize the shape of it. It's complicated, she whispered, looking down at her scuffed boots. It's simple, Gabriel countered, leaning closer, dominating her space without touching her. Someone hurt you. I want a name. Before Amara could deflect again, her coat pocket vibrated. A harsh, aggressive buzzing that sent an instant spike of adrenaline straight into her veins. Her breath hitched. She didn't need to look. She knew it was Marcus. He had a sixth sense for her absences, a radar tuned perfectly to her fear. She pulled the phone out with shaking fingers. The screen lit up with 3 back-to-back texts. Where the hell are you? You said you were taking the train straight home. Answer me, Amara, or I swear to God you'll regret it. Gabriel tracked the violent tremor in her hands. He looked at the phone, then back to her terrified eyes. He read the entire story in her silence. The way her breathing had turned shallow, the way she made herself smaller, waiting for a blow. Give me the phone. Amara clutched it tighter. I can't. If I don't answer him, he gets. She couldn't finish the sentence. She couldn't describe the way Marcus's voice would drop before he backed her into the kitchen counter. The way the air in their apartment would turn toxic right before he struck. Gabriel held out a large, calloused hand, palm up. You can. And you will. There was a commanding weight to his voice that bypassed her panic. Trembling, Amara placed the phone in his hand. Gabriel stood up to his full height outside the car, looking at the screen. His expression went dangerously flat. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man deciding where to bury a body. He typed something with his thumb and hit send. What did you just do? Amara panicked. A second later, Marcus's name lit up the screen with an incoming call. Gabriel answered it and put it to his ear. Amara? Marcus's voice practically spat through the receiver, loud enough for her to hear. You think you can just ignore me and text me some smartass? My name is Gabriel Rossi, Gabriel interrupted. His tone was perfectly pleasant, conversational, and utterly terrifying. I'm calling to inform you that Amara will not be coming home tonight. Or ever. Amara's stomach plummeted. She could hear Marcus's confused, then enraged, shouting on the other end. Gabriel's expression remained stone. That is no longer your concern. As of this exact second, Amara is under my protection. If you attempt to call this phone, if you follow her, or if you come within a 5-mile radius of her, I will consider it a threat to my property. And I handle threats very personally. Marcus yelled something about calling the cops. Gabriel actually laughed, a dark, humorless sound. Call them. Ask them who I am. Here is what is going to happen, Marcus. You are going to pack Amara's belongings into boxes and leave them outside the door. My people will collect them in an hour. If a single item is missing, damaged, or held back, I will take the cost of it out of your skin. Do you understand me? Dead silence echoed from the other end. Good. Lose this number. Gabriel ended the call. He didn't hand the phone back to her. He powered it down and slipped it into the inner pocket of his coat. Amara sat frozen, her chest heaving. You can't just do that. You don't know Marcus. He's going to come looking for me. He's going to do absolutely nothing, Gabriel said, sliding into the spacious back seat next to her. The driver immediately pulled the SUV into traffic. Men like him are cowards. They are only dangerous when their victims can't fight back. You couldn't fight back. Now you can. I don't even know who you are. Amara cried, the sheer absurdity of the situation finally breaking through her exhaustion. You just upended my entire life in 3 minutes. Why are you doing this? Because you were collapsing and you needed help, Gabriel replied calmly, looking out the tinted window at the Manhattan skyline. And because I have the resources to provide it. What resources? She demanded, shrinking against the opposite door. Gabriel turned his dark eyes back to her. A muscle flexed in his jaw. I run an organization in New York. We handle distribution, union logistics, and conflict resolution for individuals who prefer to operate outside the boundaries of the law. I believe the media calls it being a mafia boss. Amara stared at him. Her vision blurred again, but this time it wasn't from hunger. "You're joking." "I don't joke." She looked at the immaculate cut of his suit, the lethal grace in his posture, the absolute certainty he had possessed when threatening Marcus. He wasn't lying. She had just been rescued by one of the most dangerous men in the city, and she was sitting in the back of his car. "I don't want to be involved in anything illegal," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "You won't be," Gabriel stated, unbothered. "I am offering you a safe place to heal. My business requires neither your participation nor your approval." "Then what do you want from me?" she asked, waiting for the catch. Men always wanted something. Gabriel shifted his gaze, locking onto her bruised neck one last time before meeting her eyes. "Nothing. You eat the food I provide. You sleep in a room with a lock on the inside of the door. And when you are strong enough to stand without passing out, you decide what you want to do with your life. Until then, you let me handle Marcus." It sounded like a fantasy. A terrifying, impossible fantasy. Amara thought of the cold apartment. She thought of Marcus's heavy footsteps. She thought of the fact she hadn't eaten a full meal in 4 days because he controlled her bank accounts. "Okay," she whispered to the dark interior of the car. The drive to Tribeca was silent. The SUV slipped into a highly secure underground garage, and Gabriel escorted her into a private elevator that required a retinal scan to operate. When the doors parted, Amara stepped into a sprawling penthouse that looked like it belonged in an architectural digest. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the Hudson River. The aesthetic was sharp and masculine, dark oak, slate, and minimalist leather furniture, but an unexpected warmth permeated the space. A woman emerged from the hallway. She looked to be in her late 50s, with warm, olive skin, sharp eyes, and silver hair tied back neatly. "Elena," Gabriel said, his voice softening just a fraction. "This is Amara. She'll be staying with us for a while." Elena took one look at Amara's pale, bruised face, her trembling hands, and the oversized coat swallowing her thin frame. Her expression shifted from professional to fiercely maternal in an instant. "Welcome, Kara," Elena said gently, stepping forward but maintaining a respectful distance. "You look like you could use a hot shower and a full plate." The unexpected kindness lodged in Amara's throat like a stone. "I don't want to be an imposition." "You are a guest," Elena corrected firmly, offering a warm smile. "And guests in this house are protected. Come, I will show you to your room." Amara glanced back at Gabriel. He was standing by the massive windows, removing his coat, his dark eyes already tracking something on his phone. He had stepped back, giving her space, demanding nothing. Elena led her down a quiet hallway adorned with framed classic art and opened a heavy oak door. The bedroom was larger than Amara's entire apartment. A massive bed with a plush white duvet sat in the center. An ensuite bathroom gleamed with marble. "There are fresh clothes in the closet," Elena pointed out. "Mr. Rossi keeps a rotation of sizes for emergencies. They will do until we can fetch your things. Take your time." Elena left, pulling the door shut behind her. Amara stood in the center of the room. She walked over to the door and turned the deadbolt. Click. She locked it from the inside. For the first time in 8 agonizing months, she knew with absolute certainty that no one was going to break that door down. She sank to the edge of the bed, buried her face in her hands, and finally let herself cry. Hours later, Amara woke to the smell of roasting garlic, butter, and seared meat. Her stomach cramped violently, a sharp reminder of her starvation. The room was dark, illuminated only by the glittering New York skyline outside the window. She had slept in her clothes. Moving to the bathroom, she splashed water on her face. Her reflection was a ghost, dark circles under her brown eyes, hollowed cheeks, and the ugly ring of bruises around her throat. She tugged her scarf higher and braved the hallway. The kitchen was massive, anchored by a vast marble island. Elena was pulling a pan from the oven, humming softly. "Ah, you're awake," Elena beamed. "Sit. Your body needs fuel." Amara practically collapsed onto a bar stool. Elena placed a steaming bowl of rich chicken and vegetable stew in front of her, along with a thick slice of buttered sourdough. Slowly, Elena warned gently, "Your stomach will rebel if you rush." The food tasted like a miracle. Amara forced herself to eat in small, agonizingly slow bites, tears prickling her eyes at the simple luxury of a hot meal she didn't have to beg for. Footsteps echoed on the hardwood. Gabriel entered the kitchen. He had shed his suit jacket and tie, wearing only dark trousers and a black button-down shirt rolled up at the forearms, revealing sleeves of intricate, dark ink wrapping around his wrists. He moved silently, pulling a crystal tumbler from a cabinet and pouring 2 fingers of amber bourbon. He leaned against the counter opposite her, taking a slow sip. Better. Amara swallowed her soup and set the spoon down. Yes. Thank you. For everything. Unnecessary, Gabriel replied flatly. I had your belongings retrieved. They are in the spare room next to yours. Marcus is currently packing his own bags. He's leaving the state by midnight. Amara's heart skipped a beat. What did you do to him? I had a conversation with him, Gabriel said, his dark eyes unwavering. I explained that New York was no longer a healthy climate for him. He agreed. Amara wrapped her hands around the warm bowl. Are you always this blunt? Yes. Gabriel took another sip of bourbon. Most men in my position prefer to lie to women to make themselves seem softer. I don't see the point. You are smart enough to know exactly how dangerous I am. Pretending otherwise insults your intelligence. Amara studied him. The lethal grace, the dark tattoos, the absolute, unwavering confidence. You're a criminal. You hurt people for a living. Yet you're treating me like I matter. Why? Why did you stop for a stranger on the subway? Gabriel stared at her. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until Elena quietly stepped out of the kitchen, leaving them completely alone. Gabriel set his glass down on the marble with a soft clink. He didn't look away from her. Because when I was 22, Gabriel said, his voice dropping into a deadly quiet register, I watched my older sister get systematically destroyed by a man who wore expensive suits and smiled for the cameras. She hid the bruises, just like you. She starved herself to keep him happy, just like you. And by the time I had the power to stop him, it was too late. Amara's breath caught in her throat. The raw, unflinching honesty of his admission hung in the air between them, stripping away the mafia boss facade and revealing the hardened protector underneath. I made a promise over her grave, Gabriel continued, his dark eyes burning into hers. I swore that I would never stand by and watch a woman be broken in silence again. If I have the power to stop it, I stop it. Period. Amara looked at his hands. Hands that had undoubtedly ended lives, hands that had caught her before she hit the concrete, hands that had just given her a future. I'm glad I fell in front of you, she whispered, the truth of it surprising even herself. For the first time since she met him, the hard, brutal lines of Gabriel's mouth softened into the ghost of a smile. So am I, Amara. Eat your food. You're safe now. The first 3 weeks in Gabriel Rossi's penthouse passed like a slow exhale. For Amara, time stopped being a terrifying countdown to Marcus's moods and became a quiet, predictable rhythm of healing. Under Elena's fierce, maternal care, Amara's hollowed cheeks filled out. The ugly purple and yellow bruises circling her throat faded to a dull yellow before vanishing entirely into her golden-brown skin. She slept through the night. She stopped flinching every time the elevator chimed. Every evening, the true anchor of her new life arrived. Gabriel would step out of the private elevator, shedding the bespoke armor of his suits, and join her at the massive marble island for dinner. They didn't talk about Marcus. They didn't talk about the blood that sometimes stained Gabriel's knuckles before he washed his hands. They talked about everything else. Amara told him about her Nigerian father who had taught her to love high-life music, and her white mother who had instilled in her a fierce love for restoring classic art, a passion she had abandoned when Marcus isolated her. Gabriel listened with dark, fathomless eyes, absorbing every detail as if she were handing him pure gold. In return, he gave her absolute, unflinching honesty. One Tuesday night, while snow fell over the Hudson River, Amara set her wine glass down and looked at the dark ink sprawling across his forearms. How many people have you hurt, Gabriel? Directly. A lesser man would have deflected. A coward would have softened the truth to keep her comfortable. Gabriel merely set down his fork, meeting her gaze with terrifying calm. 22, Gabriel stated, his gravelly voice devoid of inflection. More if you count the orders I have given. I do not hurt innocent people, Amara. But when a man preys on the vulnerable in my city, I ensure he stops breathing. Permanently. Amara absorbed the weight of his confession. Does it bother you? No, he said flatly. Because my darkness exists so that people like you get to walk in the light. I will not apologize for it. She realized then that she didn't want him to. The lethal, ruthless part of Gabriel was the very thing that formed the impenetrable wall between her and the nightmares of her past. He was a monster, but he was her monster. The shift between them happened 3 nights later. They were sitting on opposite ends of the vast leather sofa, watching an old black and white film. The fire cracked in the hearth, casting flickering shadows over the sharp, brutal elegance of Gabriel's face. The air in the room had grown heavy, thick with an unspoken tension that had been building for weeks. Gabriel turned his head, his pitch-black eyes locking onto hers. He didn't move closer, but his gaze felt like a physical touch. "I need to tell you something," Gabriel said, his voice dropping into a register that sent a shiver straight down her spine. "And I am telling you now, before this goes any further, so you know exactly what you are choosing." Amara's breath hitched. "Tell me." "I am entirely consumed by you," Gabriel admitted, the words raw and precise. For the first time, the Mafia boss looked entirely vulnerable. "I have been since the moment I caught you on that subway platform. I want you to stay. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never know a moment of fear again." He held up a hand before she could speak. "But I am a dangerous man. If you want a normal, quiet life, I will buy you a house anywhere in the world, fund it, and disappear. You have the absolute freedom to walk out that door right now, Amara. But if you stay, I will never let you go." It wasn't a threat. It was a vow. Amara looked at the man who had upended his entire world to protect a stranger. She thought of the cold, terrifying life she had lived before him. Without breaking his gaze, she uncurled her legs, slid across the leather sofa, and pressed her hand against the hard, stubble-covered line of his jaw. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. When Gabriel kissed her, it wasn't gentle. It was acclaiming, hungry, desperate, and possessive, tasting of expensive bourbon and salvation. Amara tangled her fingers in his dark hair, pulling him closer, feeling the sheer, overwhelming power of a man who would burn the world to the ground to keep her warm. Over the next 2 months, they built a life in the quiet eye of the storm. Amara began painting again, filling the spare room with canvases. Gabriel transitioned his operations, ruthlessly delegating the violent aspects of his syndicate to focus on legitimate logistics companies. He refused to let the underworld bleed into their sanctuary. On a warm evening in early May, Gabriel ordered his armored SUV and blindfolded Amara, his large hands gentle as he tied the silk over her eyes. When he finally untied it, she gasped. They were standing inside a sprawling, beautifully restored brick-and-mortar art gallery in the heart of Soho. The walls were painted a pristine white, the lighting was perfect, and the name on the front glass read, "The Amara Rossi Gallery." "You did this?" she breathed, turning to him, tears pricking her eyes. "I bought the building," Gabriel corrected, stepping close and resting his hands firmly on her hips. "You are going to fill it. I want you to have your dreams, Amara. I want you to have a world that is completely yours." Before she could wrap her arms around him, Gabriel stepped back. The ruthless Mafia boss dropped smoothly to one knee on the polished hardwood floor. He pulled a black velvet box from his suit pocket and snapped it open. Inside sat a flawless, square-cut diamond surrounded by a halo of smaller stones, set in platinum. "Marry me," Gabriel commanded softly. It wasn't a question. It was a promise of forever. Amara's hands flew to her mouth, a sob of pure joy escaping her throat. "Yes. Gabriel, yes." He slid the heavy, cold diamond onto her finger, standing up to pull her flush against his chest. They kissed surrounded by empty walls that were waiting to be filled with their future. For 10 perfect, unbroken minutes, the world belonged entirely to them. Then Amara's purse vibrated. It was a harsh, jarring sound that cut through the quiet of the gallery. Amara pulled out her new phone. The screen displayed an incoming text from an unknown number. Still smiling, wrapped in Gabriel's arms, she opened it. The smile instantly died on her lips. It was a photograph taken just moments ago. It showed Amara and Gabriel through the front glass window of the gallery. But superimposed directly over Amara's chest was the bright, neon-red crosshair of a sniper rifle. Beneath the image was a single line of text. "You took my empire, Rossi. Now I'm going to take your heart." The phone slipped from Amara's trembling fingers, clattering loudly against the hardwood floor. Gabriel caught it before it could bounce. His eyes scanned the image. In less than a second, the tender, devoted man who had just proposed vanished. The air in the gallery turned to ice. The lethal, ruthless Mafia boss snapped back into existence, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle ticked visibly beneath his skin. "Gabriel," Amara whispered, the old, familiar cold of panic creeping back into her veins. "Who is that?" Gabriel didn't answer her immediately. He pulled his own phone from his coat, hitting a speed dial while simultaneously gripping Amara's arm and pulling her away from the glass windows, shielding her body with his massive frame. "Julian Vance," Gabriel said into the phone, his voice a low, vibrating growl that promised unimaginable violence. He's out. Lock down the penthouse. Send a strike team to the gallery. Now! He hung up and turned to Amara, his pitch-black eyes burning with a terrifying, protective fury. We are going to war, Gabriel stated. The next 72 hours were a study in suffocating tension. Gabriel transformed overnight from a devoted fiancé into a warlord preparing for a siege. The penthouse became a fortress of heavily armed men, glowing surveillance monitors, and low, urgent voices. Amara learned the truth about Julian Vance in the dead of night, while Gabriel meticulously loaded a matte black handgun at the kitchen island. 6 months ago, I dismantled a human trafficking ring running through the port of Newark, Gabriel stated, his voice a low, vibrating growl. Julian Vance was the architect. I seized his assets, burned his ships, and turned his surviving lieutenants over to the feds. I thought he was buried. I was wrong. Now he wants to take my future the way I took his. So we hide? Amara asked, her golden brown skin pale in the dim light. No, Gabriel replied, slamming the magazine into the grip with a sharp metallic clack. We give him exactly what he wants. A target. Gabriel moved their wedding. They didn't wait for the summer. 3 days later, under the cover of darkness, an armored motorcade transported them to a sprawling, private estate deep in the Hudson Valley. It was a fortress disguised as a luxury manor, surrounded by dense woods, reinforced stone walls, and patrolled by 30 of Gabriel's most lethal men. On the day of the wedding, the air was thick with the scent of pine and impending violence. Amara stood in front of a mirror in the master suite, wearing a floor-length gown of ivory silk. Her dark curls were pinned back with small white roses. She looked like a queen stepping into a battlefield. Elena stood behind her, adjusting the veil with trembling hands. You are breathtaking, Kara, the older woman whispered, though her eyes were bright with an unshed, nervous energy. Gabriel will not be able to look away. I just want to get through today, Amara admitted, her heart hammering against her ribs. When Amara walked down the stone terrace toward the altar, there was no music. There was only the wind through the Hudson Valley trees and the heavy, watchful silence of armed guards in the perimeter. But when she saw Gabriel standing beneath an arch of white roses, everything else vanished. He wore a bespoke black tuxedo, looking like absolute, terrifying perfection. His pitch-black eyes tracked her every movement, burning with a fierce, unwavering devotion. He took her hands. They were rock steady. The officiant, a retired judge on Gabriel's payroll, began the vows. Do you, Gabriel Rossi, take this woman? I do, Gabriel interrupted, his eyes never leaving Amara's. Skip to the rings. Now! The judge blinked, fumbling for the velvet box. By the power vested in me, I... A deafening explosion ripped through the eastern perimeter. The ground violently shuddered. Debris rained from the sky, and the beautiful stained glass lanterns surrounding the terrace shattered into 1,000 pieces. Gabriel's calm instantly shattered into lethal action. He pulled Amara flush against his chest, shielding her body with his own as the deafening crack of automatic gunfire erupted from the tree line. The smell of burning cordite and pulverized stone choked the air. Dante! Gabriel roared over the chaos. His massive right-hand man materialized through the smoke, a rifle already raised to his shoulder. East wall is breached, boss. We count at least 20 hostiles. Gabriel shoved a cold, heavy handgun into Dante's free hand. Take Amara and Elena to the bunker. Now! Lock the door and do not open it for anyone but me. Gabriel, no! Amara screamed, grabbing his lapels as Dante pulled her backward. You're coming with us. Gabriel grabbed the back of her head, pulling her into a hard, desperate kiss. I made a vow to protect you, he said, his gravelly voice cutting perfectly through the roar of the gunfire. I am going to keep it. Go! Dante dragged Amara through the heavy oak doors of the manor, Elena practically running ahead of them. The last thing Amara saw before the doors slammed shut was her husband, a man of brutal elegance, walking directly into the smoke, his weapon raised, becoming the monster the world feared so she could live. The safe room was buried 2 floors beneath the estate. Dante shoved Amara and Elena inside, slamming the massive, foot-thick steel door shut. The deadbolts engaged with a series of heavy, metallic thuds that sounded like a vault sealing them in a tomb. The bunker was cold, smelling of stale air and gun oil. A bank of security monitors dominated the far wall, but half of them were already dead, dissolved into static. Suddenly, the power grid above failed. The bunker plunged into pitch blackness for 3 agonizing seconds before the backup generators kicked in with a low hum. Harsh, red emergency lights flooded the room, bathing the concrete walls in the color of fresh blood. Amara ran to the surviving monitors, her silk wedding dress whispering against the concrete floor. She watched in horror as miniature wars played out across the estate grounds. Vance's mercenaries were heavily armed, swarming the beautiful White Rose archway. "Where is he?" Amara demanded, her voice echoing in the red-lit bunker. "Dante, where is Gabriel?" Dante pressed a hand to his earpiece, his face carved from stone. "He's holding the main hallway. He's drawing them away from our position." Above them, the muffled, heavy thump-thump-thump of boots echoed through the ceiling. The fighting had breached the manor. The sharp, metallic ping of bullets striking stone vibrated down through the bunker walls. Elena sank into a leather chair in the corner, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. "Give me a gun," Amara said, turning to Dante. Dante stared at her. "My orders are to keep you safe." "If Gabriel falls, they are coming through that door," Amara stated, her golden brown eyes flashing with a fierce, terrifying resolve she didn't know she possessed. "I will not die cowering in the dark. Give me a gun." Dante hesitated, then pulled a sleek black Glock from his waistband. He handed it to her, showing her the safety. "Aim for center mass. Keep pulling the trigger until they stop moving." Amara stood facing the steel door, the heavy weapon feeling unnatural in her hands, her white gown stark against the bloody red light of the room. She waited. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The gunfire above reached a deafening crescendo, then slowly, agonizingly, faded into a heavy, suffocating silence. Someone pounded on the steel door. Amara raised the gun, her finger tightening on the trigger. "Dante," a raw, exhausted voice came through the thick steel. "Open it." Amara nearly dropped the weapon. Dante threw the deadbolts. The heavy door swung open, and Gabriel stumbled into the red light. He looked like a man who had walked through hell. His tuxedo jacket was gone. His white dress shirt was torn to shreds, and a massive dark crimson stain was spreading across his left shoulder, bleeding heavily down his tattooed arm. "Gabriel." Amara dropped the gun and ran to him, catching him as his knees finally buckled. Dante hauled Gabriel's other side, lowering the Mafia boss into a chair. "Sit rep, boss." "Vance's men are dead or routed," Gabriel ground out, his jaw clenched against the agonizing pain. He looked at Amara, his pale, sweat-slicked face softening for a fraction of a second. "I told you I wouldn't let them reach you." Elena rushed forward with a first aid kit, her hands trembling so badly she dropped a roll of gauze. She quickly began packing Gabriel's shoulder wound, her breath coming in ragged gasps. As Elena worked, Dante stepped back into the hallway and returned a moment later holding a crushed, blood-spattered burner phone. His expression was a storm of absolute fury. "Boss," Dante said, his voice dropping an octave. "I pulled this off the mercenary leader's body. I checked the encrypted messages." Gabriel hissed as Elena tied off the bandage. "Did Vance send them the estate coordinates?" "Yes," Dante said, not looking at Gabriel, but locking his eyes dead onto Elena. "But Vance didn't find the estate himself. The coordinates, the security rotations, the exact location of this bunker. It was sent to Vance from a phone inside our network. Yesterday." The red-lit bunker went dead silent. The hum of the generator felt deafening. Gabriel's head snapped up. His pitch-black eyes darted from Dante to the phone and finally landed on the woman currently pressing a bloody bandage to his shoulder. "Elena," Gabriel whispered. The name sounded like a death sentence. Elena froze. The bloody gauze slipped from her fingers, dropping to the concrete floor. She backed away from Gabriel, her eyes wide with absolute, naked terror. "No," Amara breathed, stepping between them. "No, Gabriel, that's impossible. Elena is family. She wouldn't." "Read the messages, Dante," Gabriel commanded, his voice devoid of all human warmth. The lethal, unforgiving Mafia boss had returned, staring at the woman who had cared for his home for 15 years as if she were already a ghost. "Message sent at 2 a.m., Dante read, his voice flat. "The girl is in the master suite. The boss rarely sleeps. If you hit the east wall during the ceremony, the guards will be out of position." Dante looked up. The IP address traces to the penthouse Wi-Fi, to Elena's personal tablet. "Why?" Gabriel's voice was a soft, deadly blade. He stood up, ignoring the blood dripping down his arm. He stepped toward Elena, towering over her. "I gave you a home. I trusted you with my life. I trusted you with her life. Why did you sell us to a trafficker?" Elena broke. She collapsed to her knees on the cold concrete, sobbing so violently she could barely draw breath. "He is Sophia," Elena wailed, clutching the fabric of her skirt. "He has my daughter." Gabriel stopped. The muscle in his jaw jumped. "Vance called me 4 days ago." Elena choked out, the tears streaming down her olive skin. Sophia was walking home from her university. Vance's men took her off the street. "He sent me a video of her locked in a shipping container. He said if I didn't give him your exact location, he would cut her into pieces and mail them to the penthouse." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Elena, seeing not a traitor, but a mother shattered by an impossible choice. "I begged him," Elena sobbed, looking up at Gabriel's unmoving face. "I tried to find another way. But he knew everything. He told me if I warned you, Sophia would die screaming. Gabriel, I love you like a son. But she is my little girl. I had no choice." "You made your choice," Gabriel said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "And because of it, 12 of my men are dead in the grass upstairs. And my wife was nearly murdered on her wedding day." Gabriel reached out, his bloody hand wrapping around the grip of the Glock Amara had dropped on the table. He raised it, pointing the barrel directly at Elena's chest. "Gabriel, stop!" Amara screamed, throwing herself in front of the barrel. Gabriel's eyes widened, instantly lowering the weapon so it wouldn't point at her. "Move, Amara. She betrayed us. In my world, treason has only one punishment. She is a mother trying to save her child." Amara pushed hard against Gabriel's uninjured chest, forcing him to look into her eyes. "Julian Vance backed her into a corner and manipulated her, just like Marcus manipulated me. If you pull that trigger, you are punishing the victim, and you let Vance win." "She nearly got you killed," Gabriel roared, the absolute terror of losing her finally breaking through his iron composure. "But I am still here." Amara fired back, refusing to back down. "We are both still alive. If you kill her, Sophia dies in that shipping container. You told me you use your darkness to protect the innocent. Sophia is innocent. Do not become the monster they think you are." Gabriel stared down at his new wife. He looked at her white silk dress, smeared with his own blood, and the fierce, unyielding grace in her golden brown eyes. Slowly, agonizingly, the tension drained from his massive frame. He lowered the gun and engaged the safety. Gabriel looked over Amara's shoulder at the weeping housekeeper. "Lock her in the cellar," he ordered Dante. "She stays there until this is over." As Dante hauled a sobbing Elena to her feet and out of the bunker, Gabriel turned to the bank of shattered monitors. The absolute rage in his eyes shifted into cold, calculated warfare. "Bandage my arm tighter," Gabriel commanded Amara, his voice dropping into a deadly, quiet register. "Vance thinks he broke my house from the inside. He thinks he won. What are we going to do?" Amara asked, picking up the fresh gauze. "We are going to find a shipping container," Gabriel said, looking at the blood on his hands. "And then, I am going to rip Julian Vance's empire apart brick by brick." The surviving rooms of the Hudson Valley estate were immediately converted into a war room. Gabriel refused pain medication, allowing a medic to stitch and rebandage his torn shoulder while he stood over a mahogany table covered in tactical maps of New York and New Jersey. Amara didn't change out of her ruined wedding dress. The heavy ivory silk was smeared with Gabriel's blood and coated in stone dust, but changing felt like surrendering. Instead, she sat at a laptop Dante had procured, her golden brown fingers flying across the keys. "Julian Vance is a ghost," Dante growled, slamming a fist against the table. "He knows we're coming. He's wiped his offshore accounts and abandoned his known safe houses. He has to be keeping Sophia somewhere," Amara said, her eyes locked on the screen. While Gabriel's men tracked finances and shell companies, Amara had focused on Sophia. She was scrolling through the 20-year-old's public social media accounts. "Here," Amara said, her voice cutting through the heavy tension in the room. Gabriel was at her side in an instant, his dark, fathomless eyes scanning the screen. 3 days ago, Sophia's roommate posted a complaint about a creepy car idling outside their dorm in Manhattan. Amara pointed to a blurry photo attached to the post. "Look at the background. It's a dark SUV, no plates. But look at the reflection in the puddle next to it." Dante leaned in, squinting. The reflection caught the front plate. He immediately typed the numbers into his encrypted tablet. The room held its breath. 10 seconds later, the tablet pinged. "Registered to a dummy logistics corporation out of Delaware," Dante stated, a deadly grin spreading across his face. "But the billing address traces back to a commercial shipping yard in Newark." Sector 4. It's supposed to be an abandoned lot. That's where he is, Gabriel said, his voice dropping into that terrifying, gravelly register. He grabbed a tactical vest, sliding it over his good shoulder. Dante, gear up the men. We move in 5. Amara stood up, pushing the laptop away. I'm coming with you. Gabriel froze. He turned to her, his expression instantly shifting from warlord to desperate protector. Absolutely not. Amara, you are staying here under heavy guard. You are not walking into a shipping yard controlled by a trafficker. You promised me, Amara said, stepping right into his space, refusing to back down. She grabbed the lapels of his ruined shirt. In the penthouse, you promised that we do this together. I am not sitting in another bunker waiting to find out if my husband is dead. Gabriel stared down at her, a muscle ticking in his jaw. He looked at her bloodstained dress, at the fierce, unwavering fire in her eyes. He realized then that the terrified girl he had caught on the subway was gone. In her place was a queen who belonged in his world. You stay behind me, Gabriel commanded, his voice a low vibration. If shooting starts, you hit the dirt. Understood? Understood, she breathed. The drive to Newark was a blur of flashing highway lights and suffocating silence. They arrived at the shipping yard just as the freezing rain began to fall. The smell of rust, salt water, and old oil choked the air. Sector 4 was a maze of towering, rusted shipping containers stacked 3 high, creating narrow, dangerous steel canyons. Gabriel's men moved with absolute, terrifying precision. They cut the locks on the main gate and fanned out. Gabriel kept Amara tucked safely behind his massive frame, his handgun raised, his pitch-black eyes scanning the shadows. Container 402, Dante whispered through the comms. Heat signatures inside. Gabriel signaled the breach. Dante kicked the heavy metal latch, throwing the container doors wide open. Inside, illuminated by the harsh glare of Gabriel's flashlight, sat Sophia. She was terrified, shivering, and chained to a steel support beam, but she was alive. Sophia, Amara gasped, rushing forward while Gabriel maintained cover at the door. We're here to take you home. Your mother sent us. Gabriel pulled a heavy set of bolt cutters from Dante and snapped the chain holding the girl. But the second the steel gave way, the darkness outside erupted. The deafening crack of automatic gunfire echoed through the shipping yard. Bullets slammed into the side of the metal container, sounding like a dozen sledgehammers. Ambush! Dante roared, returning fire into the rain. Vance left a welcome party. Take Sophia. Run for the vehicles. Gabriel shouted over the chaos, shoving Amara and the crying girl toward the back of the container, where a rusted maintenance hatch hung loose. I'm not leaving you. Amara screamed over the gunfire. You are getting her out of here. Gabriel roared back, his eyes wild with the desperate need to keep her safe. Go. Now. Amara kicked the rusted hatch open, dragging Sophia out into the freezing rain. They sprinted down a narrow alley between 2 towering stacks of containers. Behind them, the shipping yard had turned into a war zone. The sharp smell of cordite mixed with the salt air. Suddenly, a massive figure stepped out from behind a container, blocking their path. He raised a rifle, aiming it directly at Amara's chest. Before the man could pull the trigger, Dante materialized from the shadows, tackling the shooter to the wet concrete. A gunshot went off wildly. Dante grunted, a spray of blood erupting from his thigh, but he didn't stop. He pinned the man and knocked him out cold with the butt of his weapon. Keep moving. Dante gritted out, clutching his bleeding leg. Get to the SUV. Amara dragged Sophia the last 50 yards, shoving her into the back of the armored vehicle, just as the wail of police sirens began to echo in the distance. Dante had tipped off the FBI. The entire port was about to be swarmed. But Gabriel wasn't at the car. Stay here, Amara ordered Sophia, locking the doors. Ignoring Dante's shouts, she ran back into the maze of containers. She followed the sound of the heaviest gunfire until she rounded a corner and stopped dead. Julian Vance was on his knees in the mud. He was a wealthy, arrogant-looking man, but right now, he was bleeding from a cut above his eye, entirely disarmed. Gabriel stood over him. The American Mafia boss looked like the Grim Reaper incarnate. The rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead, washing the blood down his injured arm. He held his Glock aimed directly at Vance's forehead. His finger was tightening on the trigger. Do it, Rossi, Vance spat, blood leaking from his mouth. Kill me. Let your new wife see exactly what kind of monster you really are. She'll leave you. They always leave when they see the blood. Gabriel's jaw locked. The ruthless, violent part of him, The part that had ruled the underworld for a decade, screamed to pull the trigger. Vance had nearly killed his wife. Vance had ruined his wedding day. Death was too good for him. Gabriel. Gabriel's head snapped up. Amara was standing at the edge of the alley. She was soaked to the bone, her wedding dress ruined, trembling in the freezing rain. She didn't look terrified. She looked at him with absolute, unwavering love. "I don't need you to be good," she had told him once. "I need you to be honest." Gabriel looked at Vance, then back to Amara. He realized in that agonizing split second that killing Julian Vance wouldn't erase the danger. It would only prove that Gabriel was the exact same kind of monster. He wanted to be a man who built a future, not a man who only knew how to end them. Slowly, deliberately, Gabriel lowered his weapon. He engaged the safety. "You're not worth it," Gabriel said, his voice cold and flat. "My wife is waiting for me." Vance's eyes widened in genuine shock. "You're going to let me live?" "I'm going to let the Federal Bureau of Investigation have you," Gabriel corrected, as the red and blue flashing lights of the approaching feds reflected off the wet concrete. "You're going to spend the rest of your life in a supermax prison, Vance. You're going to rot in a cage, and you are going to think about the fact that I won." Gabriel turned his back on the trafficker. He walked through the rain, straight to Amara, and wrapped his good arm around her, burying his face in her wet curls. "It's over," he whispered against her neck, his massive frame finally shuddering with exhaustion. "It's finally over." 4 hours later, Gabriel was back in a hospital bed, glaring at a federal agent while a surgeon finished properly repairing his torn shoulder. Amara sat beside him, holding his hand. Sophia had been reunited with a weeping, handcuffed Elena at the federal precinct. Vance was in federal custody, his empire permanently dismantled. "I should have killed him," Gabriel grumbled, leaning his head back against the stark white hospital pillows. Amara smiled softly, reaching up to brush a stray lock of dark hair from his forehead. "But you didn't. You chose mercy. For the first time in your life, you chose to let the law handle it." "I did it for you," he admitted, his pitch-black eyes meeting hers with that same terrifying intensity from the grocery store. "I looked at you in that ruined dress, and I knew I wanted to be better. I want a life that is completely clean for us. We're going to have one," Amara promised, kissing his knuckles. "Once you recover, we are getting married again. A quiet wedding. No explosions. No federal agents." Gabriel's brutal, elegant face finally softened into a real, genuine smile. "I'm holding you to that, Amara." "I know you are," she whispered, leaning down to press her lips to his. The monster had finally found his humanity, and the terrified girl had found her courage. Together, they had survived the fall. The trial of Julian Vance lasted 3 agonizing weeks. Amara sat in the gallery of the federal courthouse every single day, watching as federal prosecutors methodically dismantled the trafficker's empire piece by piece. Gabriel did not attend. His shoulder was still healing, requiring intense physical therapy, but the real reason he stayed away was simpler. He knew if he was in the same room as Vance, he would not be able to stop himself from killing the man. So Amara went in his place, bearing witness to the destruction of the monster who had tried to murder them. When the verdict was read, it was absolute. Julian Vance was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to spend the rest of his life in a federal supermax prison without the possibility of parole. Elena, the housekeeper who had traded their safety for her daughter's life, received a different sentence. She was given 10 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole in 7 due to her cooperation. Sophia, Elena's rescued daughter, wept in the courtroom, relieved her mother was alive but carrying the heavy guilt of the collateral damage caused to save her. With the threats finally buried, the heavy, suffocating tension that had gripped Gabriel's world began to lift. 3 months later, Amara stood on the polished hardwood floors of the Amara Rossi Gallery in Soho, watching the contractors install the final lighting fixtures. The space Gabriel had bought for her was now a reality, filled with beautifully restored classic art, sleek modern canvases, and a quiet warmth that felt entirely her own. On opening day, the gallery was flooded with art lovers, collectors, and curious New Yorkers. Gabriel stood behind the main reception desk, ringing up purchases with his uninjured hand. He looked entirely out of place among the delicate art and the bohemian crowd, a man in a bespoke charcoal suit with hard, brutal edges and pitch-black eyes that had seen too much darkness. Yet, when a customer asked for a recommendation, he listened with genuine interest, and Amara felt a profound peace settle in her chest. This was the beautiful, improbable life they had built together. As the gallery emptied that evening and the doors were locked, Gabriel walked up behind Amara, wrapping his arms around her waist. Surrounded by the smell of fresh paint and quiet possibilities, he rested his chin on her shoulder. "I've been thinking about the wedding," Gabriel murmured, his gravelly voice vibrating against her back. "The real one. The do-over." Amara turned in his arms. "Have you changed your mind?" "No. I want to move it up," he commanded softly, his dark eyes unwavering. "I don't want to wait anymore. I want to marry you again as soon as possible, without worrying about who might try to stop us." Amara smiled, reaching up to touch the hard line of his jaw. "Where?" "Here," Gabriel said, looking around the peaceful gallery. "It's perfect." They were married on a Sunday evening in late August. There was no fortress, no massive security detail, and no impending violence. Amara wore a simple, elegant gown of cream silk, completely unlike the heavy, blood-stained dress from their first attempt. Gabriel wore a dark suit without the jacket, his sleeves rolled up to reveal the dark ink spanning his forearms. There was no retired judge this time. Dante, Gabriel's massive, scarred right-hand man, had gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. A fact Gabriel claimed was the most absurd thing his head of security had ever done. "Marriage," Dante began, looking at them with a rare, genuine smile, "is choosing someone and then choosing them again every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Gabriel and Amara have already proven they can survive the worst. Now they get to prove they can build the best." Gabriel took Amara's hands. "I caught you when you were falling, and you've been catching me ever since," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've seen the darkest parts of who I am and stayed anyway. I promise to protect you, not because you need protecting, but because loving you means standing between you and anything that would hurt you. I promise to love you with everything I have, for as long as I'm breathing." Tears pricked Amara's eyes as she spoke her own vows. "When I collapsed, I was broken and starving. You didn't just catch me, you rebuilt me," she whispered. "You're not a safe choice, but you're real, and you're mine. I promise to love all of you, the darkness and the devotion, the man who saves people and the man who destroys threats without hesitation." Dante pronounced them husband and wife, adding with a grin, "Kiss your bride before something explodes." The small gathering of friends laughed, and when Gabriel kissed her, there were no sirens, no federal agents, and no betrayals. There was only them. Later that night, as Gabriel drove them back to the penthouse through the quiet, sleeping streets of Manhattan, Amara leaned her head against his shoulder. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely, undeniably safe. "Hey," Gabriel said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "I need to tell you something." Amara shifted, looking at his handsome, illuminated profile. "What?" "I'm done with the dangerous parts of what I do," Gabriel confessed, his voice steady and resolute. "I'm transitioning everything to legitimate businesses. Dante and the others are handling the exit strategy now." Amara sat up, her heart skipping a beat. "When did you decide this?" "The day I woke up from surgery and realized I'd almost died before getting to have a real life with you," Gabriel replied, glancing at her. "I don't want to spend our marriage waiting for the next threat. I want to spend it building something better." Tears blurred Amara's vision as she leaned across the center console to kiss him, tasting the sheer, undeniable promise of a clean future. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Don't be proud yet," Gabriel murmured against her lips, the ghost of a smile touching his mouth. "Ask me again in a year when I'm complaining about how boring legitimate business is. I'll remind you that boring is exactly what we're aiming for," she laughed softly. "Boring, happy, and alive," Gabriel agreed. As they pulled into their garage, the last remaining pieces of fear released their grip on Amara's heart. They had survived the fall, fought their way through the darkness, and come out the other side changed, but whole. 6 months later, on a cold February morning, Amara stood in the quiet warmth of her art gallery and stared down at the pregnancy test in her hand. 2 pink lines. She had suspected it for a week, but had been terrified to confirm it. Terrified of the vulnerability it meant, and the ways a baby would completely upend the peaceful world she and Gabriel had finally secured. But staring at those 2 lines, the fear dissolved into something else entirely, a terrifying, overwhelming, and absolute joy. The gallery door chimed, and Gabriel stepped inside, shaking the winter snow from his tailored charcoal overcoat. He had just returned from a final meeting with his lawyers. The transition of his less legitimate holdings was complete, and in a matter of weeks, his hands would be entirely clean. He looked up, caught the expression on her face, and froze. "What's wrong?" Amara held up the test. Gabriel crossed the polished hardwood floor in 3 massive strides. He took the small piece of plastic from her trembling fingers, stared at it, and then looked at her with an expression she had never seen on the former mafia boss before. A chaotic tangle of wonder, fear, and desperate hope. "You're pregnant," he breathed. "I'm pregnant," Amara confirmed, letting out a shaky laugh. "Are you? How do you feel about that?" Gabriel pulled her against his chest, his immense strength suddenly incredibly gentle. "I'm scared," he admitted, his gravelly voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife. A family. A life that wasn't just survival and violence. And now I have all of it with you. What if we mess this up?" She whispered into his coat, breathing in the scent of cedar and snow that meant home. "Then we'll mess it up together and figure out how to fix it," Gabriel promised, pressing his lips to her hair. "That's what we do." That evening, they broke the news to Dante over dinner. The massive, scarred head of security immediately pulled out a notepad and started drafting lists of security protocols for pregnant women and infants. Gabriel told him to relax, but Dante ignored him entirely and kept writing. They didn't announce it to the public or the media. This new life was theirs alone, private and precious, shielded from a world that had tried to destroy them. As the months passed and the baby grew, their lives shifted to accommodate the future. Gabriel's business transition finalized without a single incident, and they moved out of the high-rise penthouse into a beautiful, secure brownstone in Brooklyn with a private yard. They painted the new nursery a pale, gender-neutral yellow, wanting the baby's arrival to be a surprise. In September, exactly a year after their second peaceful wedding, Amara went into labor at 3 a.m. Gabriel drove them to the hospital with the eerie, practiced calm of a man who had navigated actual war zones. To him, labor was just another kind of battle, longer and messier, but ultimately winnable. 17 hours later, their daughter was born. She had dark hair, fathomless dark eyes, and a furious cry that demanded the world's attention. As the nurse placed the baby in Amara's arms, the entire universe narrowed down to the weight of her daughter against her chest and the solid warmth of Gabriel's hand on her shoulder. "She's perfect," Gabriel whispered. "She's ours," Amara corrected softly. They named her Elena. They didn't choose the name to instantly forgive their former housekeeper for her betrayal, but rather to remember that human beings are deeply complicated, that good people can make terrible choices out of desperate love, and that redemption is possible even when absolute forgiveness is hard to grant. Miles away in a federal prison cell, the older Elena received word that she had a granddaughter who bore her name. Sitting in the cold dark, the incarcerated woman wept with a profound sense of grace that felt like redemption. Eventually, the nurses cleared the hospital room, leaving just the 3 of them. Gabriel sat in the chair beside the bed, holding his tiny daughter with the same immaculate, terrifying precision he applied to everything he valued. He stared at the baby as if she were a miracle he hadn't earned. "I used to think my life was already written," Gabriel said quietly to the quiet room. "That I'd made too many dark choices to ever deserve anything good. And then you fell in front of me and proved me wrong." "We proved each other wrong," Amara smiled, reaching out to trace the baby's cheek. Gabriel adjusted his hold on his daughter, his brutal, elegant features softening into pure devotion. "I promise you," he murmured to the infant, "I will make sure your life is nothing like mine was. You'll grow up safe, loved, and protected. And you'll never have to wonder if you're worth saving." Amara's throat tightened with tears. She already knows. She has us. They sat together in the quiet hospital room, reflecting on the impossible journey that had brought them here. From a subway platform to a hospital bed. From starvation and absolute terror to abundance and joy. It hadn't been clean or easy. It had been violent, messy, and infinitely complicated. But every terrifying choice and every close call had led them to this perfect, breathing representation of the future they had fought to secure. Gabriel looked up from their daughter, his pitch-black eyes meeting Amara's with the same intensity she had fallen in love with. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," she replied. It was simple, undeniable truth. The foundation everything else was built upon, and it was everything. Epilogue a year later. The Brooklyn brownstone was quiet, bathed in the soft, golden light of early autumn. Upstairs, little Elena was finally fast asleep in her pale yellow nursery, her breathing a steady, peaceful rhythm that Amara could hear through the baby monitor on the kitchen island. Amara stood by the marble counter, pouring 2 glasses of expensive amber bourbon. She wore one of Gabriel's oversized dark button-down shirts, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, her golden-brown skin glowing in the dim light. The heavy, suffocating fear that had once defined her life felt like a lifetime ago. In its place was a profound, unshakable safety. Footsteps echoed softly on the hardwood floor. Gabriel entered the kitchen, the sleeves of his sweater pushed up to reveal the intricate ink winding up his forearms. Even completely at rest, the former mafia boss radiated a lethal, absolute confidence. But when his fathomless dark eyes landed on her, the hard lines of his brutal, elegant face softened into pure devotion. He didn't say a word. He crossed the room with the practiced grace of a predator, taking the bourbon glass from her hand and setting it aside with a soft clink. Before Amara could protest, Gabriel's hands, steady, strong, and terrifyingly gentle, spanned her waist, pulling her flush against his solid chest. "You're working too late," he murmured, his low, gravelly voice dropping into a register that sent a familiar shiver straight down her spine. "I was reviewing the new acquisitions for the gallery," Amara breathed, looking up into his pitch-black eyes. "Legitimate business is demanding." "I can think of better demands," Gabriel replied. His hand slid up to cup the back of her neck, his thumb tracing the smooth, unblemished skin of her throat. The ghosts of their past were entirely gone, replaced by the heated reality of his touch. When he kissed her, it was an absolute claiming, hungry, deep, and intoxicating. Amara tangled her fingers in his dark hair, pulling him closer, letting out a soft sigh as his lips moved down to trail burning, passionate kisses along her jawline and neck. There was nothing tentative about it. It was a desperate, undeniable reminder that they had survived the darkness and earned every second of this light. Gabriel lifted his head just enough to rest his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the quiet kitchen. "A year later," he whispered, his massive frame rising and falling against hers, "and I am still completely consumed by you." "Good," Amara smiled, leaning up to kiss him again, slow and thorough. "Because I'm never letting you go." A personal note. This is a story about falling, and the profound grace of being caught. It is about choosing love in the dead center of chaos, and the strange truth that sometimes the most dangerous people in the world are the safest ones to fall for, because they understand that protection isn't about controlling someone. It's about standing in front of them and declaring that nothing will get through to hurt them. Amara went to a subway platform starving and terrified, hiding the physical marks of her abuse beneath heavy clothes, because someone else controlled her life. When her body gave out, Gabriel caught her. He didn't catch her to own her. He caught her because he refused to watch someone suffer when he possessed the power to stop it. That single, decisive choice to catch instead of let fall changed the trajectory of both their lives. Love isn't always found in sterile, safe places. Sometimes it grows in the dark, fed by unflinching honesty instead of polite pretense. Gabriel never lied to Amara about what he was, a man with blood on his hands and enemies in the shadows. And she chose him anyway, not despite his darkness, but because he wielded that darkness with a fierce, protective purpose. Their story is messy, violent, and real. Real love isn't about perfection. It is about seeing someone completely, taking in all their scars and sharp edges, and choosing to stay with them through explosions, betrayals, and the slow, beautiful work of building something that lasts. Ultimately, there are no simple villains in this story. There are only people making impossible choices with incomplete information. Elena's betrayal was agonizing, but it was born of a mother's desperate love for her child, a choice any parent would understand. The measure of a person isn't found in their darkest mistakes, but in whether they are willing to grow and become better for the sake of the people they love. Gabriel walked away from an empire not because he was forced to, but because Amara gave him a reason to want a future that was more than just surviving. That is the real victory. If you have ever felt invisible or broken, remember that you are not. Somewhere, someone will see you for exactly who you are, and when you fall, they will catch you. Thank you for watching Amara and Gabriel's story. May you always have the courage to catch others when they fall. There you have it, viewers, the end. Please leave your comments. I read every single comment, subscribe, like, and see you in the next story.